Brooklyn, actually, where I live now. I graduated from the University of Michigan with a political science degree in 2008, which, as I was telling the editors, I know sounds like forever ago, but feels to me like yesterday. And a lot has changed since then, for sure. Even physically at the Daily, it sounds like. And I work for the New York Times. I'm on the editorial board. I'm actually the youngest member of the editorial board, and that brings its own adventures. I cover New York and mostly politics for us. So the Governor Cuomo, who's kept me very busy lately, and Mayor de Blasio, who always keeps me busy, and just, politics in general. And I just wanted to make myself available to you guys if you have any questions about just career paths, or what New York is like right now, or anything about journalism. I know everybody's journey in journalism is very different. And when I was at the Daily, I was I started on the editorial board. So I was actually, for a while, the only woman. Things have really changed since then, which is great. And I was there for freshman, sophomore year. I had a column as well. And then I went to the news side for my senior year, and ended up sticking with it. And I've been through a bunch of layoffs because I graduated in 2008. But I'm more in love with the profession than ever, and probably not qualified for much else at this point. So anyway, I'll leave you with that. And if you have any questions, like personal or not, I think a high school kid came to the Times last year and asked me if I made a living wage. So no question is too personal. And I'll just throw it to you guys. Just before you raise your hand, just, I guess, or however this works, just want to introduce yourself, tell me what your role is on the Daily, maybe where you're from, and then we can go from there.
Okay,
go for it.
Hey again, Maggie. I'm the statement editor, which is our weekly magazine. Last year I was the editorial page editor, co-editorial page editor, before then columnist, before then also an edit board member. So I mentioned this earlier, but I was just wondering if you could talk about writing both opinion writing and news writing, and how you found your voice, how you found kind of your niche, and that journey briefly.
Sure. So I started as a opinion writer, which is potentially, I guess, unusual. But first of all, when you're in college, that's the best thing about it. You get to experiment. And so I'm glad I did. I mean, there's no penalty for writing opinion in college, and you can just try your hand at it and see if you like it. I was a news reporter for 10 years, and then really didn't think that I would go back to opinion potentially ever. I really loved being a news reporter, and that kind of surprised me because I actually love politics, and so I have a lot of opinions. And I thought I was surprised at how much I loved news reporting. But when the Times called 2 years ago, it really was like a dream job. It was like, wow, okay, I can still write about New York, but I can actually have, say what I'm thinking. It also came at a time for me personally where it was like I was at the Wall Street Journal, during the 2016 election, and it was very dispiriting time because we were being internally censored essentially by the powers that be, and it was just difficult. So that worked out, but I don't think that I could have. I think my news background was invaluable. I mean, the difference for us is I used to write about problems, how things worked, and now I'm writing about not just the problems, but also proposing solutions. And that's very satisfying. If you have a beat that you love, I mean, for me, writing about New York, which I love, is great because you have a lot of power as an opinion writer, and specifically as an editorial board writer at the Times. If we can call, right now we're trying to keep the beaches open in some responsible way in New York City for the summer. So that's kind of my task maybe for next week. And that's like very satisfying. Whereas you kind of sometimes feel, I used to feel pretty frustrated. You're just constantly writing about problems. But both are great.
Thanks.
Yeah. Let's see. Eli's trying to chime in here.
Yep, that's me. Hi, sorry. My name's
Okay.
Eli. I'm from New Jersey. I am a columnist for The Statement. I've also written on arts. I've had a food column with arts, and I've worked as the associate editor on The Statement as well, which Maggie was just talking about. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today. I'm just wondering what the most frustrating or difficult part of your career has been, be it like an individual job or a specific instance, or kind of like a theme overall, and like how you managed to get through that.
Sure. So because I graduated in 2008, I have actually been through 4 all staff layoffs. So where the entire publication gets shut down or the entire group loses their jobs. That's been really difficult. The only thing I can say is that if I had stayed in any one of those jobs, there's no way I would be in my job now, which for me is honestly like, I don't want it to sound trite, but really is just like a dream job for me. So what it taught me is that, you know, you have to take risks in life and in your career as well. And if you're in a position to do that in any way, I mean, it wasn't always easy. And I went into some debt to do it once in a while. But if you can do that, that's my best advice, is to really like follow your passion, journalism or not, and take risks, because you'll be rewarded for it. I also like, I mean, it sucked, right? Like I was living by myself, paying New York rent, and really having to hustle to do so in between jobs at points. So if you're not down for that, that's totally understandable. But you know, risk reward. Let's see. Jenna?
Hi, I'm Jenna. I'm from California. I write for the Crime Beat section, and this is my first full year on the Daily, and I've only done news. And I sort of have a question with the idea of breaking into the industry, just how it's sort of hard to get your first internship and stuff, and making connections with people, and just how did you get so many cool opportunities?
Sure. So I had a lot of help. I do think networking is really important. One thing to do is to know who the recruiters are and to know when they are coming to campus or somewhere nearby. And that's something that I can help you guys with offline as well in terms of the times. But also I would say, you know, some of the journalism associations, like the National Association of Black Journalists, Hispanic and Asian journalists, they have conferences. That's really good to think about. And even if you're not a member of one of those groups, still to connect yourself with those recruiters. So that's one way to do it. Another way is to find out if the places that you love to read or listen to or watch have internship programs. That's really, and fellowships. So just doing a little bit of research about that and then honing in on what you're most excited about. And then just in general, so the best advice I ever got was just, no matter what, it doesn't matter where you're writing. It can be like a tiny local paper nobody's ever heard of. It doesn't matter. If you have, you know, 1 to 3 clips in a year that you are really proud of or excited about, that way, like if a job opportunity comes open or an internship, you know, an editor is going to say, okay, show me what you've been up to. And like, you can send that to them. I mean, that's really all you need. So not to be like overwhelmed by your output or something like that. Yeah. I like your hair.
Thank you. And thank you so much for answering the question. I really appreciate it.
Sure. Elizabeth Lawrence?
Yeah, I think Finn had the question.
I had the question. Hi, Mara. Thanks for coming on. My name is Finn. I'm a senior from Northern Michigan. And this year with like the editorial board doing like the whole new endorsement with like the TV show and everything, I was just sort of curious what your experience was with that and what you thought of the whole process.
What did you think of the process?
I thought it was really interesting. I thought like it was cool to see how it would happen in a 40-minute TV special, but just like how long was it? Like how demanding was it? I guess I don't know.
It was insane. So it was fun. It was entertaining. And I'm glad it's over.
Thank you.
Thanks. Julia? Yeah, Julia?
Hi, thank you so much for coming. We really appreciate it.
Sure, thanks for having me.
So I'm Julia. I'm from Rockville, Maryland, and I'm a senior on the government beat reporter for the news. And my question was, as a woman of color working in a professional newsroom this summer, which was predominantly white and male, I had difficulty always bringing issues or stories that I thought, were really important, but involved Latino and Latinx communities, and that would have otherwise been ignored if I wasn't the person bringing them up. And I was wondering, have you also found that difficulty, and like, how do you handle that burden?
Yes. Okay. So I think one thing that I would just say to everybody, no matter what your race, gender, ethnicity, background is, if you're really doing your job right, as a beat reporter, all of those issues, all the above people and issues should be like front of mind. Like you don't want to leave it on your coworkers of color or your disabled coworkers or whoever it is to bring up issues that correspond to them. Because for me, it's like, trying to think of a good example right now, but it's exhausting, right? Because you're constantly trying to do your job really well, and prove yourself at the same time, but you're also up against this issue of like, when you raise issues that actually affect vulnerable people, you seem self-interested, which is really, really frustrating. But I would just say that like, the more people from different groups, just like, you can call it intersectionality, you don't have to, it's just doing your job well. If you're covering New York City and you're a government reporter and you're not writing about an entire neighborhood of people or a community, like, you're not actually doing a good job. And so trying to get editors to understand it, for me, the most useful thing, it depends on who your audience is, quite frankly. I think you really just need to try and find fellowship with other reporters that are doing the right thing. And you just have to not be shy. As a woman, especially, you have to kind of fight those instincts to be a people pleaser, and you have to just be willing to be annoying, and just trust yourself. Yeah.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Sure. Let's see, Alex?
Hi, thank you so much
Hi.
for coming, or like coming virtually, I guess. My name's Alex. I'm a senior editor on the news section. I oversee coverage of academics and student government. And before that, I reported on admin for a semester. So really my question, I guess, is like, even as you were talking about like 2008 and kind of overcoming that, like, I think even we're all kind of in like a similar time for like the same reasons and different reasons. Like, a lot of journalism internships are getting canceled. Like, a lot of post-grad things are kind of up in the air, especially with journalism. That kind of really does, like, for a lot of places, like, move with like the economy and like just what's happening out in the real, like, in the world. So like, what is your advice, I guess, for like bouncing back, especially when things get canceled or things get changed? Like, in your experience with layoffs, like, how did you kind of like get through it, overcome it, and bounce back and like get yourself back to like where you wanted to be?
Great question. I would say be patient, be brave. I think it does, again, go back to wherever possible, if you can just get a couple of clips here and there that you feel good about, then when those jobs start becoming available and when those opportunities start becoming available, you'll be ready. And I definitely don't think people should work for free, but even if it's not paying the bills, like, if you have to take another job, whatever it is, waitressing, something, anything, do that, and then write, 2 pieces. I think what I see a lot, I know a lot of people who they either went that route and they took like an office job that had nothing to do with journalism, because understandably, I mean, they were scared, and some people don't have a choice, so there's no judgment. But if you go that route, it becomes very difficult to freelance. So I would say, like, if you can make enough money just to live on, if you can live with your parents, if that's an option, live with your friends, like if you can swing that and freelance and kind of hustle, I think that's better. Don't be afraid to be like broke for a little while, if that makes sense. That things are better now than they were in 2008. I mean, I think people know that. I don't know. There were a lot of people who were older who told us, like, oh, like, give up. They were super sarcastic. They're like, oh, this industry is dead. We now know that people actually care about good content. They are reading more content than ever before. Journalism look at the White House and now this pandemic, like it's a vital, vital resource. So there will be opportunities, just hang in there. All right.
Thank you.
Sure. Let's see. Callie?
Yes, hi.
Hi.
I'm Callie. I'm also from New York City. I'm a news staff reporter, and I was previously a campus life beat reporter and assistant news editor for news. As you said, like, people are reading now more than ever, and journalism's more important than ever. So, like, what's the biggest challenge that you faced reporting during the pandemic?
The hardest part as a reporter, which I still am and consider myself to be, is like your instinct is to go out and be in the story or cover the story on the ground. And for the most part, you can't, and it wouldn't be responsible to do so. That is emotionally difficult for me, especially because this is my home. The other thing that's difficult is that it's impossible to separate yourself as a reporter from this story when you live here. I mean, I spoke to a man last week who I was writing a piece about how to bring down the mortality rate in general, but specifically among Black and Hispanic communities, which are disproportionately getting hit and dying from this disease. And I was talking to a man who runs a nonprofit for day laborers, and he was literally like asking me what he should do, because he usually had plenty of food, but he can't compete with the increased demand for, with the retailers. So he's got, hundreds of families to feed and only 60 families he could feed. And so he ended up like picking them out of a hat. And like when you hear these stories, like it becomes, you're glad you can tell them, but it's emotional. Does that answer the question? Awesome.
Yes, thanks
for calling in. Annie?
Hi.
Hi.
I'm Annie. I'm the managing photo editor, one of them. And I'm from Michigan. And then you sort of touched on this, but I guess I'm just curious about, like, I feel like I have to limit my news consumption for my emotional well-being, especially with politics. And I'm just interested in, like, what are your practices and what are your habits for someone who has to read and write these things all day and know about them? Like, how are you able to separate that from being a human? You know what it just can, it's a lot of that.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think if you guys, some of you will be like war correspondents. Some of you will cover companies. Some of you will go into professions that have nothing to do with this, but maybe you'll be a doctor and this is just as relevant. I mean, I'm still trying to figure it out. We all are. So that's the first thing. It's very difficult. I run a lot. I'm a runner. I go on a lot of long walks. Sometimes, I mean, there's a lot of anxiety right now in New York. I mean, I went on an 18-mile walk last weekend. Like I just needed to stretch my legs, get out of my apartment and clear my head. Talking to friends, socially distanced walks with friends, watching bad TV, because I guarantee you, like, you guys, I know because I was also on the Michigan Daily, like, you guys are all so deeply engaged in what you're doing, and it's great. But frankly, if you're going to sit down, if a bad TV show is going to like force you to sit and focus on one thing for an hour, like, don't be ashamed of that. Reading is great too. And you know, I think beyond that, some meditation. Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure. Jasmine.
Hi. So I'm.
Hi.
Thank you again for coming, and we
Sure.
really hear you. So I'm from Michigan, and I covered the campus life beat this past semester, and I'm one of the summer managing news editors. And I was just wondering if you had any advice you would give to your college self based on your experience with journalism and in life after graduation, and just like anything you think you would do like differently or like at Michigan or anything like that.
Yeah, I wish that I had spent more time reporting, like doing more investigative reporting, and more time reporting on the different communities. I feel like Michigan is such a big school, so there's a real opportunity to do a real deep, or to commission pieces that look at deep dives into what is it like to be, I don't know, a rower at Michigan, or in the ROTC, or part of a religious group. I think we all kind of walk through campus and you know that those different communities are coexisting, but there's so little overlap. And I just wish that, you know, somebody could embed with different kind of groups in campus life to really get a sense for, you know, kind of seeing beyond the veil, if that makes sense. And I think that could really help build community and empathy. So that's what I regret not doing more of. Congratulations on the new role. Good luck this summer.
Thank you.
Yeah. Benjamin.
Hi, how are you?
Great, how are you?
I'm doing all right. I'm part of the team that runs the social media, and I'm from DC, but I'm still in Ann Arbor right now.
I can see your flag.
Yeah, exactly.
Statehood.
My question is, like, I've just like talking like with casual conversations with friends and or text messages, I've kind of discovered almost like a confusion about the distinction between the news side of a paper and the editorial side of a paper. And I think a lot of it stems from like, they don't, like, there's no, like, you don't make the flip of a page anymore. And so I find out, like, my friends don't know when they should be expecting the Times to be giving it to them straight up, when there should be analysis, columnists, editorial board, like the paper's endorsing someone. What does that mean? Like, is that the front page? Just a whole, like, every question you can imagine. And they come, because I work for the paper, they often ask me. And so I was just wondering if there's a conversation at the Times, or if you have thoughts about like how, like, how to inform people almost, or how to transition. I'm just curious.
Yeah, it's a great question. When I talk to high school students, I end up bringing the physical paper, and I'll ask them, do you know what the difference is between news and opinion? And some do, some don't. And then I'll say, well, do you know what an editorial is versus an op-ed? And then they'll say, usually they don't. And I say, well, okay, take a look at the paper. Like, here's the editorial. And so op-ed is literally opposite the editorial page, right? It's not opinion editorial. So there's a lot of adults who don't get this still, people in the Times building who don't get it. I mean, I think, listen, one thing is, it's clear that the American public, like, we are learning, you know, from the Russian disinformation campaigns, like, information is not the same as knowledge, right? Anybody can have information, right or wrong. So it is still the case that you will see on our content, this is opinion, this is an editorial, this is not. But I think when you're reading it on like Twitter, for example, one thing that I've been thinking about is there some way to, you know, color code content? So in other words, like, okay, this is an opinion piece, and so maybe it's orange, right? Whereas like news is green, or I don't know. I mean, that's just like a small example, but I think broadly speaking, this is an issue that's larger than journalism. This is like a education issue. This is a Facebook issue, because people are consuming content with no regard, some of them, to the source, to where it's coming from. So I think, you know, you have to kind of teach people how to read. And I think that's like part of that's incumbent on us, just to be upfront about where we're coming from. But part of it is actually like a larger societal, you know, education-based task. I don't know. I know it's probably not very satisfying, but we're thinking about these things. Absolutely. I think my screen, hold on, screen is frozen. Okay, Parnya.
Hi, I'm Parnia. I'm from the LA area, and then I'm also on news right now. I am the administration beat reporter. So the question I had is just something I've been curious about recently. I've been watching a lot of the like task force, like administration press briefings about coronavirus, and like I know you could see it in the past, but I feel like especially now, I don't know, everyone's really been noticing how the president reacts to certain reporters, but not only the reporter, but the whole like newspaper network as a whole, like when he's not satisfied with what they're saying. I've just been like really curious, has that ever affected you or like any of your colleagues when you're reporting? Do you ever feel pressure to ask questions a certain way, either by the administration or your editors? Because I know he calls people out, and I feel like that might just affect how things go with stories.
Yeah, I mean, I think what you're seeing at the White House press corps, I'm not there. I have several friends who are, including Maggie Haberman and Josh Dawsey. I mean, everything is intensified there. It's not a normal situation. So definitely they're under a lot of pressure. They don't, I mean, I will tell you this, like, because I know them and also because from my own experience in the New York press corps, because New York City has a press corps just like the White House does, and we follow around the mayor, the governor. Reporters are not going to be intimidated by the president in that way. I mean, it's not an easy thing to do, but that's not an issue. I mean, I think outlets, definitely every news outlet has its own slant or is coming from a certain place for sure. But I mean, I think the only pressure at the New York Times is to get the story right and to get the facts that the public deserves. And that's true for most serious outlets, whether they be conservative or liberal. And I actually think it's a great point that you're making, because it's one of the key things that differentiates, I believe, like a legitimate, sound news organization from something that is something else, right? You know, are we doing it to tear down a politician, or are we doing it to like get public information to the public? Like the Wall Street Journal has a conservative slant, but it's still a very serious news organization that's asking important questions and telling important stories, and they do so to tell the story. That's not really what Fox does, right? So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, but
yeah, no, it does.
Yeah, okay, sure. Erin?
Hi, thank you so much for coming. I'm Erin. I'm the Daily's managing editor, and I came from opinion. I joined the editorial board and then wrote a column and then senior edited EP, henceforth upward. But yeah, so like I know you've talked, this is kind of coming off of the vein of like Ben's question about kind of opinion news and like, but more so kind of on your side of it, because I know like being like generally an opinion like journalist myself, there are like a lot of like kind of news purists who really like to read the news like facts, no voice, no anything. Yeah. And kind of like how you deal with balancing like the responsibilities of a journalist of like getting the story straight and like getting it all together, but also like putting your voice behind that and like building a story that like you want to put out, like the basics of journalism and like the reporting side of it with like getting your voice in there and like putting a story together that you want to put out.
Yeah, so it's funny. I mean, it's a hard, I do have friends who are news purists. Being an opinion journalist does not mean, or should not mean, that you stop reporting. That's a total misconception. I mean, there is a lot of that. There's frankly too much of it, in my opinion. but I think I definitely, what I used to do is I used to, like, when I started at the Times, I would like write a news story and then like add my opinion after. So it took some transitioning. I do think about it a lot in terms of like solutions, and are we calling for something? Is there some action that we're pushing for? It's different if you're writing like a personal piece, that's totally fine. But in terms of editorials, for example, you know, we last summer, this is on my mind because again, they just announced today in New York that they're not going to have pools open and likely beaches open this summer, which is just devastating to me personally, and just for all these city kids who have no access to the outdoors. But last summer we did a piece calling on the city to give free swim classes to every kid in New York. So like that's a good example of something that's like, it's a call to action. And in that, it wasn't just because it's fun, it's like all the data about drownings and about, you know, how much it might cost, which is not that much, it turns out. So you know, doing that kind of reporting, it should be absolutely integral to what project you're doing. And if you can't say like what action you want people to take, or what law you want to address, or what problem you want to fix, then you probably don't have the right idea just yet.
Great, thank you so much.
Sure. Francesca.
Hi, how are you?
Hi, great, how are you doing?
Good, yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, so my name's Francesca, I'm from Michigan, and I will be this summer's managing news editor, and I was a academics beat reporter. So I was just wondering, so you've been in like the industry for a while, so how have you seen journalism like change over the years as things have become like more digital? And also like has fake news like become more of a problem with the rise of, you know, digitalization?
Yeah. Well, first of all, congratulations on the new gig. That's excellent. So yeah, I mean, I graduated exactly as the industry and the world was digitizing, like in that. So I mean, it was like waking up in Technicolor. When I was a senior at the Michigan Daily, we were still cutting out our clips, pasting them on a piece of paper, and sending them to like the 16 smaller markets. Like I had an internship at the Lexington Herald Leader, like the summer after I graduated. I mean, and then literally within weeks of my graduating, all of that was over. And then we were living in a digital world. So like, I definitely, it has been digital since 2008, 2009. It's become more so, but I guess like that's, you know, if you talk to somebody who's like 5 years older than me, they'd be like more, I mean, for me, my entire career has been in digital markets. When I was at the Atlantic right out of college, we helped digitize the magazine. I mean, things are getting more digital all the time. So that hasn't been as much of an issue as the fake news concern, which is, I mean, it's a whole other conversation, right? It's hard, like all you can really do is continue to do your job with integrity. And I do think that there's like more responsibility that should be put on platforms like Facebook and Twitter that are frankly like cannibalizing the content that all of us create, not really adding value necessarily. And then they're not moderating that content in any kind of a responsible way, which is of course very different than censorship. So I don't have an answer for that, other than, you know, really it's not just the role of journalism. I mean, there's like, clearly we have a civic crisis in this country, right? And it extends into voting, into all kinds of other areas. So I mean, I just try and do my job, frankly. There's half of the country or some portion of the country that you're not going to reach if you're doing journalism at this point. And that's a problem. I don't know. Yeah. Xena?
Thank you so much.
Sure. Xena, is she on the line?
Hi.
You on the line, Xena? Hi. That's okay. Hi.
Hi. So I'm Xena. I'm a junior. I'm studying foreign policy, and I'm the long forms editor for news. And so I was just wondering, like, do you have any insight on how this pandemic will affect foreign news coverage, specifically at the Times?
Can you be more specific about what do you mean by affected? Affected in terms of the reporters doing the work or the coverage?
Just, do you think there'll be increased coverage? Because, like, on the one hand, if we're going into a recession, that's typically when foreign news coverage is decreased. But on the other hand, it seems like, global issues are more important than ever, and we're living in an increasingly globalized world where China has, more of a major role.
Are you interested in international reporting or?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, first of all, if you're interested in international reporting, like there's always going to be an opportunity. It might be a while before you get there, but don't be dissuaded. Just go for it. I don't know. I mean, I think one of the things about this crisis is kind of like in 2008. It's so unpredictable. I'd like to say that there's going to be more interest abroad, but my instinct is that with the United States in such crisis and with limited funds at news organizations, probably not. It's probably going to be a while. I mean, the one thing is, as things hopefully start to calm down in the United States, then the focus will certainly turn in terms of where the story is to less wealthy and less developed countries, that if they get hit at all like we did, it's going to be catastrophic. So people will be covering that. But I think it's too soon to know. Yeah. Good luck.
Thanks.
Magdalena, you're back there.
Yeah. Hey, I had another question.
Sure.
So I was wondering if you could speak to your experience being like the only woman, or I guess one of 3 women on edit board back on the Daily, and like how that impacted those discussions, and then kind of like comparing that, if there is a comparison to be made about being like the youngest member on the edit board at the Times now, and just like how those experiences have been.
I had a great experience at the Daily. The only thing that was hard was at the time, I don't know if it's the same now, but because I started in 2004, right after the affirmative action decision, and the relationship between the Black community and the Daily, which was never great, was really at kind of like an all-time low in some ways. And so that was like difficult, kind of feeling like caught in between. But some of those guys are still my friends. Had a great time, and learned how to fight my corner for sure. And I mean, we also like used to get together, and it was like a frat. I mean, it was a blast. We would get together every Tuesday and Thursday, and then like watch the Daily Show, like with Jon Stewart. Like, it was great. Now, I mean, I have great colleagues. I'm at a point in my career, thank God, where to a certain extent, can choose who I work with, which is a huge privilege. And so I at this point have a lot of support, and that's great. I do think, like, being younger, I'm still kind of trying to find, especially as a woman, my presence. It's very, even in meetings, it's sometimes very difficult. I'm not a shrinking flower necessarily, but there's a lot of big personalities and big egos, as you might imagine, in meetings. And it's not just with colleagues, right? It's not just editorial board meetings. It's we do endorsements. I'm responsible for all the New York endorsements, and that means like the entire region, really, like the Connecticut governor's race, New Jersey governor, congressional races, AOC, Chuck Schumer, Cuomo, Bloomberg. All of these guys are kind of under my purview, and plus all of the the 51 members of the city council and whatever. And so they tend to be, there's a lot of like power games, I would say. And that could be fun. That can also just be like, as a younger woman, like you really have to stand your ground. I had one situation several years ago. I guess it was like 5 years ago. I was at the Wall Street Journal, and I was with a donor who, well, I was with a congressman at a party, and I was like schmoozing and making sources, which is just harder when you're a woman. And so I got the number and the name of one of his party goers who was a big Democratic donor, and reached out to him, hoping we could like get a coffee or a drink. And so all of a sudden he's like, yeah, definitely, let's get a drink. I end up like, he picks like a hotel bar unbeknownst to me, and like essentially forces me to have like this long, ridiculous, luxurious dinner with him at this hotel bar in New York. And then, forcibly pays the bill, literally won't let me, like physically blocked me from paying with my corporate card. And then actually insisted, also by physical force, on like walking me home across the island, which was like a 25-minute walk across town with his security guards behind us. Like, I think now I'm 33, I feel like there's no way I would stand for that. But you're going to find yourself in some great situations, some not so great situations. So my best advice is just to trust yourself and to find some people who you trust, who you can get to back you up.
Thanks.
Sorry, it was a long answer.
No.
I think let's do Sayali first.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Siley. I'm the
Siley
news editor. It's okay.
Sorry.
It's really hard to pronounce. So.
Sorry.
No, my question was just, what's something that you still like hope to see happen in your career, or something you still hope to really accomplish, or one thing you're looking forward to in the future to doing that you haven't done yet?
Sure. I would love to write a book. And I could see the appeal of maybe working in the White House press corps, but I have no interest in doing so for the foreseeable future. Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Ashwina?
Hi, I'm Asha, by the way, and thank you so much for here virtually. I think I'm the last question.
Yeah.
So I guess I was wondering, so my dad was a journalist, and I'm on photo now, and I'm not really pursuing journalism as a career, but I've always like kind of wanted to. My dad's always like, don't do it. And I guess one of the reasons why is like I'm also very interested in politics, but sometimes I'll be like photograph like the state of the state, for example. I was photographing the state of the state, and I'm like, I could be reporting on this, or I could be up there, like as the governor or as like the attorney general. And like I saw that you also majored in public policy. Was that something that you kind of struggled with, like pursuing politics or being a journalist?
So I didn't major in public policy. I was a poli-sci major, but I definitely have that. It wasn't a struggle. I mean, I think it just, first of all, we need people, and we need smart people and young women to run for office. So I think that's great. I mean, at this point, I honestly consider myself to be both a journalist, but also I consider myself to work in politics, being on the opinion side of things. That's because we openly campaign for laws and issues and changes. And there's more than one way to skin a cat, right? So it's just whatever is you're passionate about, and like you just don't know where life's gonna lead you. I mean, for me, I grew up in a house that was very political, and I was obsessed with politics as a kid, always. I thought I'd go to law school. Even when I was at the Daily, I thought I would I'll go to law school. People kept paying me to write, so I was like, oh, this is great. But I will say, like, depending on what your passion is too. I mean, I get a lot of satisfaction, more than I thought I would, from the power of my current platform, because it really is the case that like I guess I'll say like one of the things I'm most proud of that we did in the past 2 years was endorse candidates and helped flip the state Senate to the Democrats, which led to like massive bail reform and also like rental protections and a whole host of other changes. Also, like, you know, got a chance to write about AOC's race and several of those races. Actually, AOC's challenger, Joe Crowley, who had been in office forever and ever, was so sure he was going to win against her last year, almost years ago, that he did not show up to a debate with AOC and instead sent a Latina former city councilwoman to debate her in his stead, which was just like extremely offensive and ridiculous. And so like we wrote about that, and it's an art, not a science, but like you definitely, if politicians are calling you, like, you have some influence, because they, and so I kind of like roll my eyes when the politicians are calling me for their own bidding, but in all seriousness, like it's pretty cool to see the impact that you can have with like journalists have that impact in general. I just get a chance to see it more up close because they're like begging me to like write a specific editorial. But like, yeah, don't knock it, because it's definitely not dead. That's for sure.
I know, I tell my dad that every day, but he's old-fashioned.
Yeah. I mean, he also, I'm sure it's from a parent's perspective, it's like you want your kid to just be safe and not take as many risks. But I've loved every minute. So
thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much, guys. You guys can feel free to use me as a resource, and lots of people helped me along the way. So I wish you guys all good luck.